Right. Yep, no worries. All right, Robin, if we could have a roll call, please.
Alderman Bob Bauman.
Here.
Senator LaTanya Johnson. Mr. Jim Cantor.
Here.
Comptroller Liz Sumner. Representative Jesse Rodriguez.
Here.
Comptroller Bill Christensen.
Here. A mouthful of food. I think we're working on a little audio situation here. Good? Yeah. Right. Still a little echoey. Got it? Oh. Hold on one second. Is that better? All right. Okay. We'll try to talk quietly. First order of business is the meeting minutes from our last finance and personnel and joint meeting with the governance committee. So do we need just a approval? This is from both, so we'll just get it from finance and then we'll also get it from governance, correct? So we just need a approval. Any discussion on the meeting minutes from our last meeting in September? Seek a motion to approve from the finance committee. You have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We have our audio issues fixed as well, so thank you. Next, we'll turn it over to Kyle for our financial report.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's agenda includes a review of the 2025 forecast and a presentation of the proposed 2026 budget. Looking ahead to the November 14th board meeting, we'll be sharing more details on the planned refunding of the 2016 appropriation bonds. We plan to bring that item forward for approval at the January 2026 board meeting. As always, if any questions come up after today's discussion regarding the 25 or 26 numbers, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Marty directly. So in your packet today, you'll find the standard financial reports for the current year on pages 6 through 13. I'd like to discuss a few changes since our last meeting. So let's begin on page.
Kyle, 1 second, just for note, Liz has joined the meeting. Liz Sumner. Sorry, Kyle. Go ahead.
Let's begin on page 10, which compares the most current forecast, column N, the forecast presented in September, column M. So looking at line 65, column O, you'll see our most recent forecast is down just over $460,000 or 1.6% relative to September. And most of this negative variance is within operating revenues, particularly line 4, food and beverage revenue. Just last week, we finalized an agreement with GalaxyCon to move their event from 25 to 26. This shift reduced the 2025 food and beverage forecast, but those revenues will now be realized in 2026. It is worth noting that food and beverage revenues remain ahead on both year-to-date actuals and 2025 annual forecast. Operating expenses in lines 15 through 26 remain stable. Several minor puts and takes, but a net decrease in expenses of 0.18% from prior forecast. Lines 29 to 39, there's minimal movement in non-operating revenues compared to September. Positive news on lines 35 and 38, interest income and the Bucks District ticket surcharge both outperformed forecast. Similarly, non-operating expenses in lines 41 through 63 show a few ups and downs, but overall a cumulative decrease in expenses of 0.18% from the prior forecast. In summary, management is not concerned with this immaterial downward adjustment. At this stage of the fiscal year, there's limited risk remaining in the numbers, and based on the remaining event schedule and conservative forecasting, we expect final net income to finish stronger than what's presented today. I'm not going to spend time on the other exhibits related to 2025 since they haven't changed significantly since September. We'll revisit some of these figures during the 26 budget presentation. Mr. Chairman, if there are no questions on the 2025 forecast, I'd be happy to move on to the next agenda item, which is the 2026 budget.
Are there any questions for Kyle? Okay, great. We'll move on to the budget.
All right, so 2026 budget. I'll keep my comments at a higher level today since this information has already been covered. Our individual discussions. With that being said, and consistent with past practice, Marty and I met with each of you ahead of today's meeting to review the process and key assumptions used in developing the budget and to gather your feedback and input. First, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us and for sharing your thoughts and insights. We get tremendous value from those conversations. We hope they provided a deeper understanding of the district's strategy and operations. At the conclusion of this presentation, we'll be asking the committee for a motion to recommend that the full board adopt the 2026 budget at the November 14th board meeting. This budget is one that management is proud of, one that will be challenging to meet and exceed, that does not introduce material financial risk into the district. You'll notice shortly that our income statement shows modest year-over-year decrease, which may seem atypical. Even so, this budget delivers on three key positives. One, continued growth in tax revenues. Two, positive net income before depreciation. And three, a disciplined and targeted capital budget. But before diving into the budget documents, I want to touch briefly on the primary driver behind the forecast to budget decrease, which, as you're aware, is due to the absence of those several large food and beverage events that boosted 2025 results. So in 2025, events such as the Baird Triannular Reunion, Medicaid Systems Conference, the Salvation Army Belonging Event, Crew 25, and National Guard collectively contributed about $3.7 million to food and beverage revenue. While 2026 does bring new business that wasn't on the books in 2025, our top five F&B events are projected to generate about $850,000 in net income, or roughly $2.85 million less than our top events in 2025. Another unique factor when comparing 26 to prior years is interest income. From 2022 through 2024, the district benefited from an unusually high non-operating income tied to interest earnings on expansion project funds. While this was positive for the project, it artificially inflated total net income, and those funds were restricted to the project. That level of financial impact cannot be replicated in future years or replaced through normal operations activity in 2026. So these factors are important when comparing prior years to 2026, which is really built on stable revenues, positive operating margins, and disciplined spending. So let's move into the budget exhibits, which start on page 14, which is the event mix summary. This document remains unchanged from what we reviewed at individual meetings. As we can see on column A, line 21, we're still projecting to host 322 events district-wide in 2026. We'll turn the page to pages 15 and 16, which are the income statement. Column A represents the 2026 budget numbers. Column B is the 2025 forecast, and column C is the variance between the two. Columns E through H provide historical context from the past several years. I'd like to start towards the bottom with line 65. You'll see we're projecting net income before depreciation and expansion debt at $28.25 million, which is down slightly from our forecast of $28.4 million. As discussed earlier, this modest decrease is primarily driven by the change in food and beverage revenue, is offset by the growth in our tax revenues. So moving back up on the page, we'll look at operating revenues, which are lines 1 through 14, and operating expenses, lines 15 through 27. These remain consistent with what we reviewed at our individual meetings. We are projecting net operating income of about $3 million in 2026. Moving on to non-operating revenues, you can see tax revenues, lines 34, is projected to increase by 3.9%, consistent with what we previously shared. No changes in lines 35 through 38. We are projecting a decline in interest income due to lower projected cash balances and the Federal Reserve rate cuts. Moving to non-operating expenses, line 64, see an increase of about 1.6% when comparing budget to forecast. No significant changes in lines 41 through 64 from our individual meetings. Altogether, these puts and takes result in a projected net income before depreciation and expansion interest expense of $28.25 million, a modest 0.5% decrease year over year. I'll pause there. Any questions on the budgeted income statement before we?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Kyle, earlier you mentioned that there was an event, I think we call it Galaxy Con, that shifted from 25 to 26, and that had an impact on the forecast of operating income for 25. Did that revenue get shifted into the 2026 budget projections?
We didn't make any changes for that specific event in the 2020 budget. We rather allow that to cover the blue sky that we currently have in the 2026 budget. So no change was made in food and beverage revenue for that event in 26.
But there is expected to be something positive to come out of that. It's just not.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a positive. It's positive for 26 right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kyle? All right. Thank you.
Let's turn to page 17 and review the budget impact. As we discussed in prior meetings, income statement includes activity from both restricted and unrestricted funds. This exhibit breaks out how these revenues, expenses flow through the district's various fund balances. So it's a summarized version of the more detailed exhibit we began in the Finance Committee a few years ago, which is shown on page 18. But as you can see on page 17, 2026 budget supports positive cash flow in both unrestricted and restricted funds. Any questions on the fund balances? And moving to page 19 and 20, this is our capital budget. There have been no changes made to this document from our individual meetings. Our 2026 capital spend is budgeted at approximately $3.25 million. Page 20 shows how the 2026 budgeted capital spend compares to our prior years. Any questions on capital?
Kyle, I have a question.
Sure.
On the Bs, how do you determine when and if we do a B project or a C project versus depending on where we are financially? Is that
The A's are the priority and what is really approved in the budget.
Okay.
If we were to have some sort of successful year and have the means to do a B project, we could do it. We could also shift an A project if it wasn't related to life safety, security, any sort of major important issue. But right now, the A projects are what's in the budget.
Is there a ranking of the A's and B's depending on what it is, or is it just more dependent on where we are budgetary?
It's more fluid.
Okay.
Having it there, being handling the that frees up that money, and then identify everything funds to do it. Therefore, these are based on most part estimates that we've got. Of course, the old county building project less than budgeted for savings. Some of that savings to get.
Any other questions? Yes.
Pages 21 and 22 in your packet are the budgeted cash flow projections. One exhibit for unrestricted revenues, one exhibit for restricted revenues. Line 24 is the net change for the year, a decrease of about $3.1 million. As we look to 2027 and beyond, we may look to issue a one-day bond to pay for capital expenditures, which would positively impact our unrestricted cash. The board has approved similar bond transactions in both 2016 and 2022. We will continue to monitor cash closely and are cautiously optimistic that this number could improve throughout the year. Moving to page 22. This is our restricted cash flow. Given the projected increase in tax revenues and offsetting principal and interest payments, we expect to end the year at $34.4 million. Mr. Chairman, that is my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Kyle. Have any questions for Kyle on the budget? I know some of us have had a chance to go through this already, so I think that's probably why we kind of went through without too many questions. But anybody online or anybody else have questions?
No.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman, I would propose we ask for a motion to have the committee recommend the full board adopt this budget at the November 14th board meeting.
Taking a motion for a recommendation, I think of the word, for the budget.
I'll make that motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. Thank you, Kyle. Well done. Marty, up to you for the CEO report.
Thank you. First off, I would like to thank this committee individual time and allowing us to share with you and get your questions so that we can look at these meetings in the budget this week. Today, I'll be identifying the topics that I will be detailing has become customary. I will be providing an update of the WCD and Visiting Walking sales team's efforts to bookings. Also share notable meetings, conventions, and events that have occurred on our campus since the board meeting, upcoming events through the next board meeting. Continue to be recognized, Baird Center specifically, both locally and nationally, as a leader in meetings, conventions, and event venues. Look forward to sharing with you some interesting news and intelligence we've received since the September. Our Human Resources Department has really been ramping up, hire more full and part-time staff as we prepare and have begun the 25-26 event season. I'll provide an update for weeks, identifying how many full-time employees we've onboarded, how many part-time employees we've onboarded, all within the parameters of the budget. Budget 25 cast. I'm really happy to share with you, although we haven't issued the press release yet. We have hired Janine Sherman as our new Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Janine comes to us from the Wisconsin Historical Foundation, where she has been the Marketing and Communications Director since 2021. Prior to this, she has been with Vivint Health in Milwaukee, Carroll University. Prior to Carroll, she spent over a decade at Visit Milwaukee. Her official start date is November 10th. Excited for what she'll bring to our organization. And Mr. Chairman, as far as we sit here today, that concludes what I plan to speak about at the board meeting in 2 weeks.
Wow, that's as short as you've been.
Well, if you get older, you get shorter.
Any questions for Marty?
Our next meeting is the 14th.
Correct.
I think you brought it up at the
Because
September.
there was a
board
conflict with your council meeting.
I thought we might have moved it to Thursday, but that's fine.
14th still work for you, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I think it did for most everybody, Robin, that we had sent that out.
Mr. Chairman, back to you.
All right, thank you. With that, I think we the agenda for the board meeting, which is again very similar to this. It'll be both. We make sure we'll be here just due to need to vote on the budget, so make sure that we are all here. That so we can approve the budget, and I think the rest of it, again, very similar to what we just went through here today. Future meeting dates are also in here, Robin. Is that right? In our packet. Did you send out the invites for all those two, inclusive of 2026 already?
They are to come out with
Okay, great. So we'll get those sent out this week for the 2026 meetings. And then last two items here, future committee discussion items. If there's anything that comes up that you guys need and want to talk about, please make sure that you contact at least me in advance as the chair. I don't want to be sideswiped by anything. We know there's a lot going on. We have been a very inclusive board. We have been very transparent on a lot of things. So those things, please just keep me updated as to what's going on, because I know there's a lot going on with our center district here, all in a good way, right? But I just want to make sure that I'm in the know, because I get asked a million questions when things come up as well. So please make sure we do on anything at any time.
I want to just check the date. You all should have received district and visit Milwaukee to a business client holiday gathering Tuesday, December 16th. It's a very free-flowing event. Coming and going as your schedule permits.
Great.
We'd love to have all of you attend.
Absolutely. 16th.
16th
I think
December.
we got something. Thank you. Reminder of that, and we'll remind the board as well in a couple
Sure.
weeks. Again, with that, any other discussion items that you have that are mine, let us know. Obviously, we can still add them to the board meeting in 2 weeks because we publish that a week in advance. So if you have any other items now, please bring them up. If not, send me a note, send Marty a note. We'll make sure that we address those issues. With that, I will seek a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, great. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Finance meeting is adjourned.
Bucko, that was the briefest finance.
Go with roll call, please.
Mr. Grady Crosby,
We didn't hear you, Mr.
Muted.
Crosby.
Mark Flaherty,
You're muted still, Grady.
What about now?
Yep.
Representative Kalen Haywood, Mr. Jim Cantor.
Here.
Greg Marcus. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Robin. First order of business is any discussion in the approval of the meeting minutes from our last joint committee meeting, which was with Finance and Personnel and Governance. Any discussion? Take a motion for approval.
Sure.
Thank you. Do we have a second? We only have 3 here, so. Grady, do we have a second?
I'll second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah. All in favor,
Okay.
say aye.
Aye. Yeah, I wasn't present. That's the only reason I didn't chime in. But I read the minutes. Good to me.
Thank you. All right, Kyle, we'll turn it over to Kyle for our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and morning, everyone. Today's agenda includes a high-level review of the 2025 forecast. Before we get into the forecast documents, I want to touch on items that we'll discuss at the November 14th board meeting. We'll be sharing more details on the planned funding of the 2016 appropriation bonds. Plan to bring that item forward for approval at the January 2026 board meeting. Also ask the board to approve the 2026 budget. And just so the committee is aware, the Finance Committee just recommended in their meeting to have the full board adopt the 2026 budget at the November 14th board meeting. In addition to today's discussion with the Finance Committee, Marty and I had met with each of them individually to really take a deep dive into the numbers for 2026. We're happy to report those meetings went well, and we always appreciate the committee sharing their thoughts and insights. So moving into your packet, you'll find the standard financial reports for the current year on pages 6 through 13. But we won't be reviewing every page as the documents have not changed much since our last meeting. I will highlight a few key changes since that last meeting. So let's begin on page 10, which compares the most current forecast, column N, to the forecast presented in September, which is column M. Looking at line 65, column O, you'll see our most recent forecast is down just over $460,000 or 1.6% to September. Most of the negative variance is within operating revenues, particularly line 4, food and beverage revenue. Just last week, we finalized an agreement with GalaxyCon to move their event from 2025 to 2026. This shift reduced our 2025 food and beverage forecast, but those revenues will now be realized in 2026. It is worth noting that food and beverage revenues remain ahead of both year-to-date actuals and 2025 annual forecast. Operating expenses in lines 15 through 26 remain stable. Several minor puts and takes, but a net decrease in expense of 0.18% from the prior forecast. Lines 29 through 39, there's minimal movement in non-operating revenues compared to September. Positive news on lines 35 and 38, interest income and Bucks District ticket surcharge, both which outperformed the forecast. Similarly, non-operating expenses in lines 41 through 63 show a few ups and downs, but overall a cumulative decrease in expenses of 0.18% from prior forecast. In summary, management is not concerned with the immaterial downward adjustment. At this stage of the fiscal year, there's limited risk in the remaining numbers, and based on the remaining event schedule and conservative forecasting, we expect final net income to finish stronger than what is presented today. Pages 11 through 13 includes the capital budget and the unrestricted and restricted cash flow projections. On page 11, we are projecting to end 2025 with budgeted capital spend of about $3.9 million. Line 33 of this exhibit represents a project that we just wrapped up here in 2025. This is the $1.1 million public address sound system UWM Panther Arena that is now up and running and ready to use by the team tenants. On page 12, this is the unrestricted cash position, which shows an improvement of $250,000 since our September meeting. Planned to end the year at $13.5 million. And as far as restricted cash goes on page 13, this remains unchanged with a projected year-end balance of $27.9 million. Mr. Chairman, that is my report. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Kyle on the financial report? Okay, Representative Haywood is joined. All right. If not, we'll turn it over to Marty and go through our CEO report before we go through the budget on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Though it need not be said, I'd really like to have Kyle go over the forecast once again for Kalen's benefit, but I'm confident he will have read the document and it's in a good place.
Of course. That's why it's here now. He knows.
Already, there you go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I'll be identifying the topics that I will be detailing at the November 14th. As has become customary, I will be providing an update of the WCD and Visit Milwaukee sales team's efforts for future bookings. We'll also share notable meetings, conventions, and events that have occurred on our campus since the September board meeting and upcoming events through the next board meeting in January. Baird Center continues to be recognized both locally and nationally as a leader in the world of meeting, convention, and event venues. And I look forward to sharing with you some recent information we've received from our colleagues in the industry praising what we're doing at Baird Center. The Human Resources Department has been really running on all cylinders, filling all of the remaining open part-time and full-time positions. And that the board meeting, I'll share with you the number of positions that have been filled, both full and part-time, just to give you an idea of what efforts are currently right. So the press release has not been issued on this, and I expect it to go out either tomorrow or early next week. I'm happy to announce that we have hired Janine Sherman as our new Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Janine comes to us from the Wisconsin Historical Foundation, where she has been the Marketing and Communications Director since 2021. Prior to this, she has been with Vivint Health in Milwaukee, Carroll University in Milwaukee, and prior to Carroll, she spent over a decade with Visit Milwaukee. The start date is Monday, November 10th. A resolution, you may all be aware of this because it has been fairly well documented in print media and electronic media. A resolution has been introduced by Bob Bauman to consider granting permanent historic designation to the Milwaukee Auditorium, what we now call Miller High Life Theater, and Milwaukee Arena, called UWM Panther Arena. The recipient, dear property owner, us, were notified by this in writing, respectfully, by Jim Orzarski, the city clerk. The matter is being considered at the Monday, November 3rd Historic Preservation Commission meeting, 3 p.m. Should the commission endorse the resolution, it moves to the Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Committee, and ultimately to the full Common Council to either be accepted, rejected, or sent back to committee. Our team, including Joe Pickard and John Yingling, and I have had multiple meetings to develop our short and long-term engagement strategy. Short-term, a colleague of Joe Pickard's from Hush-Blackwell will be attending the Monday meeting. Will provide a statement on our behalf for the record. We expect this will move through both the Historic Preservation Commission and Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Committee. As Alderman Bauman not only serves on both entities, he is chairman of both. Our focus will be on obtaining support from enough members of the Common Council to defeat this resolution. Hunden remains on schedule to provide or to present their findings of the best and highest use in January, so nothing has changed. Before I conclude, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to throw it over to Joe to see if you have anything you'd like to add for the governance committee.
Yes, I would like to add that in light of Alderman Bauman serving on this committee, we have been asked to look at whether or not there is a possible conflict of interest issue that was raised with respect to our own bylaws that govern the board itself. There are at least two actions that are part of that consideration. One is the decision to personally file the application without notice to the board chair or anyone else on the board itself, arguably detrimentally to district itself. And then two, statements made to the press regarding Mr. Brooks's actions and or statements that mischaracterize. And so we're looking at both of those now, and we will provide a report to the chair eventually.
Well, who is he appointed by?
President.
Mayor? Okay, the council.
He used to be a mayoral appointee, right?
He has been as long as I've been here, he was appointed by Johnson when he was common council president.
I don't know if you guys some of you might remember this, some of you might not. When we built the Marriott, he did the same thing. He took a vacant building that had been sitting for 15 years with dirt floors, no tenants, and said it was historic. It cost us $500,000 because of his nonsense, because the building was built in 1926, which isn't historic. For the mayor, I don't know who we all, if it were the mayor, I would have gone to the mayor and say, this is crazy what he's doing. Rez, I don't know. And, has anyone confronted him and said, what are you doing?
I have not, and intentionally I have not, because I thought it was more appropriate to discuss it with the governance committee and then update the board.
And I have not either.
Okay.
We did loosely address it in the finance meeting, saying any of these type of things need to come to the chair. Right? We've always operated in a pretty open environment, just let us know what's going on, basically, at least let me know what's going on, so we're not blindsided by this stuff. But that was about the extent of anything from not a direct discussion with Bob.
Oh, are we streaming anywhere?
Yes,
This is open session.
this is open
Great.
session.
So you people are outside. Oh, is it online somewhere?
And we do not have on the agenda to go to closed session.
So yeah, let's not be supportive.
Hmm?
Let us not be supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this is a waste of time. And,
It's a tantrum.
hmm?
It's a tantrum. Not getting this way.
Yeah. And, I have my concerns. I got liquor licenses. It's like that. We all do. Don't like it.
I've had conversations with a number of individuals throughout the city, and they understand that, and what I've shared with them is our position is not we're against that for any building. It's just the Miller High Life Theater opened in 1909. Panther Arena opened up in 1950. Either one of those buildings are extremely active, and really our objective is to have an environment where, especially that we have engaged a study to see highest and best use opportunities, have the landscape stay as it is until we have more information about what the opportunities are, because there is nothing imminent. There are no plans to share.
I think got off the rails when it was focused on a convention hotel. It could be a sporting thing or some kind of, that other cities have to attract youth sports and all that. The convention hotel, and I wish Greg was around because I think he he and I could probably opine on this the most. Impossible to build right now. Impossible for the next 10 years and probably never. Because there just isn't the activity for it. And it's $300 million. And I don't think he'd go crazy. I'd go crazy if the city financed that.
Yeah.
So I think it's the Tell idea that got everything off.
Yeah, I
the
think
rails.
the point here is we have the situation. We'll let this continue to play out. We have everything in place for us to evaluate it, watch it as it goes. Joe and his team are involved. I think we'll get the Hunden study back to find out what the best use of this is, because I think there's a lot of facts that need to continue to come out about, is it profitable, is it not? What is the best use for the space, I think is the question. And I think there's some things that are being thrown around that I don't know where they're coming from either, right? So whether it's, it makes money, it loses money, whatever, people are making things up at the end of the day, outside of experts like you and Greg, who actually know about building hotels. I mean, if there were two people that know about doing that, it's you two guys in the city, quite honestly. I don't know enough about it, but I also know there's a lot of things in my focus group. There were a lot of people that were throwing things around that I'm not sure if they know or don't know.
Yeah,
the
they don't,
facts. And we
they
got to
don't
get the
understand.
facts out there. So I think you're right, Mark, and that the cart got a little bit in front of the horse here on some stuff, and I think we need to rein it in just a touch.
Well, and Mark, I think you're spot on as far as why this got derailed, and not really derailed, but I was very careful in the words I chose, the script I wrote, and sharing with the board back in May about the Hunden study, and led with highest and best use value, and then ticked off maybe 8 or 9 examples of things they could come back with that exist in other markets. The last of those was a convention center hotel, because that may be what they come back with, as well may be an aquarium. But because there's no outcry by anybody for an aquarium, the sexy thing to take on is the cause celeb is convention center hotel. That was not the lead of how I presented it. And I think you're right. People have perceived that to be. That's what the focus is. Although in the filing for historic preservation, there's no record or the application does not address uses. It talks about historical significance of the architecture. That's really the gist of what the Monday meeting is.
Right.
Is them assessing the application for the historic architecture. It evaluates who the architect was. Was this a relevant piece of design work? So that's why we're not intentionally going crazy over a presentation from Monday, because that's not the forum.
Well, you don't have any control. I mean, a lot of these systems, I did this. And it's people that show up at these things that don't have jobs and they don't care about economics or anything. I don't.
I'm not familiar with the end of the story.
The end of the story was we went through this meeting, and took the other thing, and we had to end up going to the Common Council, and we prevailed. Common Council, very close vote. But this was 2009. There was no construction going. People needed jobs, and that was the. But it was extremely expensive for us. And
It's a money and time.
right. And it's also if you go around Marriott, if you look at Broadway, Wisconsin Avenue, there are a grouping of 7 or 8 buildings are vacant for 20 years. The owner of the building promised at the meeting that he would take some of the proceeds and fix up the buildings. Never happened, never enforced anything. So if you look at that historical district on Wisconsin Avenue, it's Broadway, wraps around both sides of Broadway, it's nothing. It's empty buildings. And anyway, I'm getting,
Brings it back to 2009. Well, I mean, it might be helpful just to get some more perspective.
Well, I mean,
Off-site.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for clarity.
Yeah.
If this application goes through, doesn't stop redevelopment, it just adds cost to it, correct?
Do you want to address that or?
Sure, it could potentially stop it. Absolutely. It will absolutely add significant costs.
Because of the added procedures and.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question from Caitlin.
The question was, if the application goes through at the city, this will put up hurdles, so I'm most likely won't stop the development of any of those sites, but it will add cost and time. So that was the question I had.
And it could potentially stop the redevelopment that would be identified under the highest and best use study. It could potentially do that.
well, the other thing talked about excusing yourself if you're on this board and this board and this board, it's a big conflict.
That's
Yeah.
what Joe's looking at, right? His team are looking. You know, we're looking at the bylaws overall. Kind of taking a big swath at this with Joe and some other help to get some things done. I mean, there are a lot of issues, right? Because of the way the board is made up. And who's appointed by who and how it's appointed. And there are potential, but it's the makeup of the board too. And that's what's in the statute is how the board needs to be made up. So it's a big project to look at this and look through it, but Joe and his team are grinding through that as well, kind of in parallel with what we have going on. So,
You keep you busy.
Yes.
Well, you don't want to get into this. This is a big can of worms. And
Accept what's being charged and be passive?
no, I'm just saying I think we should sit down with him, with Bob or something, and go through what exactly, why? Why did you do this? Because it puts a lot of constraints on the district.
well, I think that's a good recommendation and a good thought. Maybe we should do something probably with the governance committee would be my guess, right? Just to understand this a little bit better. Let's think through that. Can we get the right people involved? Because again, we're trying to understand to your point, it's why and how, and no one was informed, and you're part of this as much as anything.
And I think our report will inform that discussion.
Okay,
Okay.
I do.
All right.
it's weaponizing. It's
So we'll wait. Joe, what's the timing on that?
We are working on that diligently. Candidly, right now, we're focusing on the November 3rd hearing, and that's where our attention is.
For sure.
We'll have something to you shortly thereafter.
Okay.
was there any talk of these buildings profitable, not profitable?
That's really part of what the highest and best use study.
Okay.
Not bleeding because of the buildings. There are some tenant agreements that need to be looked at that could affect profitability of them. Driving forces. Is there anything out there that we should be looking at that could be more profitable, more attractive to the market? One project, that's the Hunden study, and the other is separate and aside from the Hunden study. What are we looking at from a capital requirement for the next 20 years for both? We could be looking at tens of millions of dollars. I don't know the number. I know it's not $1,000. Could be tens of millions that the board needs to be aware of as far as what our liabilities are in the future, even if we continue status quo.
May I add one thing to that? Your question was broad, so I want to complete the picture. Marty answered from the perspective of the district as it currently sits. In the application that was provided, there was a reference to historical profitability, which obviously is very dated information.
Just put the new sound system in for over.
Yeah.
Those would be
And-
things that continue to come up in both.
I think a lot of people, I think think the admirals are important to the city, and a lot of people took that the wrong way, that
Yes.
admirals have to go. That's not the case. So. And the Milwaukee Theater, this was before your time. That was just a project so Gary Bruno could make a bunch of money. That's exactly what it was. And that's why it's in debt still. So.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of the Hunden study was to provide the board information to assess, consider, not necessarily to take action on it. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Any other questions for Marty? I think we have at least a path here on how to address this, and Joe and Marty, myself, will please keep us updated, especially the governance committee, on how things continue to evolve with this and how they continue to transpire. We'll try to get, then once Joe and your team put together that report, we'll try to get some time and just maybe address this as a board with our board members, specifically Bob, how we formulate the next steps.
Mr. Chair, if I may just add one other thing. Ordinarily, or in the past, I would have been reluctant and probably would not have shared what I just did as far as subject matter to the governance committee. Not for withholding, but because it's still something that we're staff-wise really looking at. There was a topic of discussion in closed session at our last meeting where I heard, as I know you did, Mr. Chairman, loud and clear, that if not the full board, certainly the governance committee wants to be involved in business matters, not necessarily the day-to-day, but more the extraordinary that the district faces. And that's really what tipped me to saying, you know what, it's an issue. It could be a hot issue. It could be something in public, in open
Right.
session. I knew I was bringing it up in open session, which is in the past why I may not have brought it up, but we can't run from that. And you as the governance committee have to be involved in these types of matters moving forward. And so I apologize for not doing this in the past. Try to learn from
Yeah,
where we've been.
it's obviously the board and specifically the committees that we've developed, Marty, are here obviously to govern and watch over, but also to give perspective, just like Mark did earlier on going through this process. And it's as much as advisory as anything as governance. So there's great wealth of talent and experience on the board to help in these situations.
I'll just say I appreciate it, taking the feedback, and it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to advocate to the full board on behalf of the leadership area of the district when we can help. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being on the board and being active.
All right, with that, anything else? Agenda review, basically very similar today, but we will also have the budget that we will, the meeting's on the 14th, just to make sure everybody knows it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. We had to move that for some conflicts, but that is the budget approval process. So everyone will need to vote on that. So please be here in person if you can. If not, certainly virtual is fine, but please attend. Future committee dates, Robin, you said you'll send those out within the next week or so for the 2026 meetings. So we will have those on the calendars and ensure that we can kind of plan around that on all our busy schedules. Any other discussion items that people want to bring up, inclusive of this board meeting coming up on the 15th? There's something that you guys want to address, let myself know, let Marty know. We do publish that agenda 1 week in advance. So we still have some time if there's anything else. If there's anything else you want to talk about now, please let me know. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
I'll move it.
We have a second. We have a move and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned.